Okay, so my name is Riley Cox, and I work for Adventure Outings with the Associated Students here at Chico State. And today we're going to be talking about Upper Park through the eyes of the Mechoopda. And so I'm joined by He-Lo Ramirez, who is the cultural steward to the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve and also a member of the Mechoopda Tribe. Um, and so he is going to take over and run this whole tour basically. I'm just here to hang out and introduce. Before we get started, I did want to mention this little outline I have here. For anyone new to Chico, any students in this tour, I just wanted to point out that Chico has the 9th largest municipal park in the country, and it's separated into two sections and kind of like a third sort of park area with Chico. But we have Lower Park here highlighted in orange. We have Upper Park in yellow, and then we have the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve here in blue. And this spans about 15 miles of public park with trails that's accessible to anyone into the foothills. So a great resource for hiking and exploring. And with that, I'm going to turn off these highlighted areas because they can get a little bit annoying. And then we'll get started here. So take it away, He-Lo.
All right. Before I get started, I just want to state, I'll stay like 5-10 minutes afterwards for questions. So if you have questions during, just keep a hold of it. I'll answer it at the end. I don't want it to get interrupted, but I promise you that I'll answer your question at the end. Or I'll do my best to. Anyways. So history of the Mechoopda. So since time immemorial, the Mechoopda people have stewarded and occupied the landscapes now known as the Big Chico Creek watershed and the Butte Creek watershed. The Mechoopda people utilized land management and stewardship practices to increase the biodiversity of the landscapes that they lived in, which benefited both humans and other organisms. Here we have a picture. It's a lithograph from Powers, which was originally printed in 1874. This is it's titled A Concow Village near Chico, but that would have been Mechoopda. So as you can see, there's some subterranean houses here. These subterranean houses are called such because they're halfway underground. Traditionally, these uis, that's their traditional name is ui, they would be built by digging a hole about 5-6 feet deep into the ground. And once you get about 5 or 6 feet deep, the earth stays at roughly like 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So that means that in the winter, it doesn't get too cold. And in the summer, it doesn't get too hot. 80 is still kind of warm, but it's still better than 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the earth that was used to, oh, can you go back a second? Thanks. And then the earth that was used to excavate the hole, that was thrown on top of a oak framework. And then this would have been earth, dirt that was covering the roof. And then there was a hole in the top that was your entrance, and then also smoke hole. All right, we're good. So I want to start out, if you don't know already, the Mechoopda Tribe actually signed a treaty, the Treaty of 1851 with the federal government. This treaty promised a reservation to the Mechoopda Tribe. All this area shaded in gray, so from Oroville, including the city of Oroville, up to Chico, up to Nimshu, including Paradise, all of that was supposed to be the Mechoopda Reservation. As you can tell by the Mechoopda not owning Oroville and Paradise and Nimshu, that treaty was never honored. This treaty also promised a whole host of goods and services. Each man was supposed to get one good pair of pantaloons and a calico shirt. I think that's like a flannel shirt. Each one was supposed to get one good dress. Each person was supposed to get like 20 milking cows. Each person was supposed to get like 100 pounds of iron. I think the whole tribe as a whole was supposed to get 2,000 pounds of steel. There was a whole bunch of horses per person and such. The treaty itself can be seen at Chico State's Digital Library. But an important thing also was that the federal government promised higher education in the treaty. It promised to put trade schools on the reservation to teach every single person a trade. So like how to be a blacksmith or how to be a farmer. So this trade school thing, which would have been really great currently if they still did free education, would be great for the Mcgipto if that still was honored, but it was not honored. So we don't get any of those things, or did. So about less than 10 years or so after the treaty that was not honored, Butte County decided that it no longer wanted Native Americans in Butte County. So the U.S. Cavalry rounded up all the Native Americans that they could find in Butte County and put them on John Biddle's ranch. On John Biddle's ranch, they were placed behind the mansion. So this would be about where Holt Hall is today on campus. And they were given two choices. Either one, work for John Bidwell and never leave his ranch or else he'll get shot. Or two, go on a death march to Covelo, which is over in like Mendocino County over by Fort Bragg. So out of the 461 that left Chico, only 277 survived. And that's because the U.S. Cavalry bayoneted women and children and elders that could not make pace with the rest of the group and were slowing them down. And they also were not given food or water on this 2-week death march. It's known as the Concal Trail of Tears or the Nomlaki Trail. And this is a quote by one of the cavalrymen that were escorting the Maidu. About 156 Indians were scattered along the trail for 50 miles, dying at a rate of 2 or 3 a day. They had nothing to eat, and while the wild hogs were eating them up, either before or after they were dead. So majority of the people that stayed on John Biddle's ranch were Mcgipto, and the majority of the people that went on the trail were not Mcgipto. But there were some Mcgipto that went, and there were some people that were not Mcgipto and stayed on the ranch and decided it was better to work for John Bidwell and never leave his ranch. Here we have a picture of Cora Asbill. This is on the Rancheria. So this is what is now Chico State Campus. She's actually in a baby cradle and it's tied to a tree. This baby cradle would actually be made out of a oak sapling. So you'd find a oak sapling that has a fork in it, and then that fork would be the frame of the actual baby cradle, kind of like a car seat. And then her mom's probably somewhere gathering acorns or doing some field work. And then this is where the baby was kept for safekeeping. Here we have a picture of the Rancheria. In the middle here is Amanda Wilson. That's my grandma, and then also happens to be the daughter of John Bidwell. And then this is her with all of her grandkids. And this is them on the Rancheria. So this would be somewhere near Concow Hall, the dormitories, West Sacramento Avenue, Mechoopda Street, Rancheria Drive, that general area. And then here is a picture of the roundhouse that was on the Rancheria. This is our people's church. This is where all ceremonial practices would be practiced, or at least most of them. Here people would dance and then play music. And then through this act of dancing and playing music would be communicating with the creator and praying to the creator. And then here we have the reservation that used to be there. So if you do not know, the Mechoopda Tribe had a reservation in Chico. It was called the Chico Rancheria. After Annie Bidwell died, she deeded this tract of land to, Annie Bidwell deeded this land to the local church. I think it was like the Presbyterian Church. And then the Presbyterian Church gave it to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who then took control of it. So between about 1915 until 1965, this is where the Mcgipto lived, until the federal government illegally seized this land and illegally stole it, and then sold half of it to Chico State and the other half to the city of Chico. This green outline is the reservation boundaries, and then the red line inside is what's left. It is this undeveloped portion of land, and that's the cemetery. If you see on the left, you can actually see what the cemetery used to look like on the Rancheria, and then you can see the church in the background. The church is about where Tony's Liquor is now. A little bit maybe forward of Tony's Liquor, but this is the general area of the church and the cemetery. So what today comprises Concow Hall, Mechoopda Hall, is the reservation. Again, the Mechoopda Tribe sued the federal government in court. They won the lawsuit by the late 80s, early 90s. And as a result of the lawsuit, they got their federal recognition back. However, the federal government still would not give back the reservation land that was illegally stolen. All right, next slide.
Yeah, and I also want to bring up, feel free to put any questions into the chat right now as a way to like save that question if one pops up in your head. That way you don't have to think about it the rest of the tour. You can put it in chat and we'll go through chat at the end and answer all those questions. The rest of this tour is going to take place pretty much in the Upper Park area. So I wanted to give a little history of Bidwell Park itself. And it was created by Annie Bidwell, basically donating all of this land. And John Bidwell got here in 1843, and he acquired basically all of Chico in 1851. It was about 22,000 acres, and he purchased it from the Rancho Arroyo Chico Mexican Land Grant. He married Annie Kennedy in 1868, and then John Bidwell died in 1900. He was 81 years old. The land was granted to Chico about 5 years after his death by Annie Bidwell as like the last wishes of John. This was what he wanted for this land. So Annie Bidwell again granted this land, and she was a strict prohibitionist and very religious. And so when she granted all of this land, it came with some stipulations or some requirements, one of which was no alcohol at all could be consumed in the park. And this actually is still a rule today. This was from the original granting, alcohol prohibited, which I thought was really interesting. I didn't realize it extended that far back. She also had rules like no hunting, the land must be preserved, and also that there could be no public picnics on Sunday in the park. That was one of her rules as well, which is kind of an interesting rule nowadays. We fast forward a little bit, 1870s, the Flume and Lumber Company built a flume from Butte into Chico. So here's a photo of that. And that was in 1860, extended all the way into Chico, actually. And here's a photo of a Flume Station. This is located, used to be located above Upper Park. And according to He-Lo, there's still some things you can find up there if you explore and are really observant. And then in 1937 to 42, the diversion dam was built, and this was built to actually divert water into what is now Horseshoe Lake. Really hard to find if this ever actually got used to divert water or when it stopped being diverted. But this was built in 1937. And then in 1967, the Yahi Trail was created. And this was created by a group of hiking, like a hiking association group, got permission to build roughly 6 miles of trail. And an interesting note about this is it really should be called the Mechoopda Trail. I believe, He-Lo, you said the Yahi were 150 miles away from this region. The Yahi didn't even inhabit this area, but for some reason they named it after them. Not sure why. I also want to mention a few things that I found pretty comical. And these were proposals that were made to the city of things to create in the park. On 5 separate occasions, they proposed building an airplane field in the park. This happened in 1921, in 1926, in 1951, and 1959. People really wanted an airplane park here. And then also a 100-acre radar bombing site was proposed to be built here in the park as well, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then for those who are new to the Chico area or who have never spent much time in the park, I just wanted to give a brief visual of sections of the Yahi Trail. Like this is just before Bear Hole, absolutely stunning in the park, beautiful views, and really cool things that you can see along the Yahi Trail. But that's enough for me. I will give it back to He-Lo.
Okay. So for this portion, I'll be talking about salmon and the broken fish ladder in Upper Bidwell Park. So first off, salmon. So like next to acorns, salmon are one of the most highly regarded food sources for many California Indians, in particular the Mcgipto. Traditionally, salmon that couldn't be eaten fresh were dried and then pounded into a fine powder for long-term storage. That way it wouldn't go bad. And then it would be rehydrated into a soup or a paste when you needed to eat it. There used to be thousands of salmon migrating through Upper Bidwell Park through Big Chico Creek. However, due to the broken fish ladder, what salmon do migrate up, so sometimes we get like 5 or so, they're not able to make it past the broken fish ladder in low water years, which for the past like 20 years, every year has been a low water year. So it's important that they get past this broken fish ladder. So I'll stay on this photo for right now. As you can see, it's broken, it's not full of water. They're not able to make it past it because there's not enough water to go through it. And their spawning grounds are on the Beaser. So they have to go past Upper Bidwell Park to even have babies. But if they're not able to go past this, they make no babies, which means there's no more salmon in the future. So this broken fish ladder has been an issue for decades. And there was a plan about 2013 to fix the broken fish ladder, but the plans were scrapped because the city of Chico couldn't come up with $400,000. That was their cost share of this $2.2 million project that they were collaborating with Fish and Game and some other organizations on. So it's not going to get fixed anytime soon. And then a side note with the history of Big Chico Creek and Upper Bidwell Park. In the 1980s, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, or now it's called it used to be called the Department of Fish and Game, now it's called the Department of Fish and Wildlife, but Fish and Game back then decided to put rotenone, it's a fish killer, into Big Chico Creek. And they started at the middle of the creek, so about where Bear Hole is. And they had this idea that if they killed every single fish in the creek and then replanted salmonids, so steelhead and trout and salmon, Chinook salmon, they put them back into the creek, they would have this great fishing area. It didn't really work out that way. Professor Emeritus Paul Maslin did a study while he was a professor at Chico State in the biology department. And he did a multi-year survey of the fish populations. And the follow-up study concluded that there was no evidence that the rotenone treatment directly increased salmonid populations, that in fact that it may have harmed the population of the native species in the creek. I'm going to quote him in the paper that he published. In terms of biodiversity, the continued failure of native fish to reestablish populations in the middle zone of Big Chico Creek must be considered a negative consequence of the treatment. So there's been a history of mismanagement of Big Chico Creek in Bidwell Park. And it's sad that it's gone this way, because I remember when I was a kid, like, you know, I'm not that old, I'm 25, but when I was a kid, I would see salmon every year. Like, you know, there might have only been 5 or 10, but I saw them jumping through 1 mile and such. But now you're lucky to see 5 salmon every 5 years. So it's an important cultural resource to the Mcgipto, and it's a shame that it's dwindling away. I'm going to go to the next subject. So oaks and acorns. So acorns by far are going to be your most important principal, like, cultural resource, food-wise. So in Bidwell Park, our 2 main species are going to be blue oaks and valley oaks. Valley oaks are going to dominate lower Bidwell Park. Blue oaks are going to be more dominant in upper Bidwell Park. And according to traditional oral history, acorns were the first food gifted to the Mcgipto by the creator. Traditionally, these oaks and these oak woodlands would be maintained with fire. Fire applied at the right time of year. Could we skip to the weevil figure?
You want the weevil?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I said weevil. I meant the weevil fire feedback loop. Okay, thanks. So if you apply fire at the right time of year, you can actually decrease the number of pests, and which will increase your acorn crop. So here is a figure that shows the TEK in action, the traditional ecological knowledge. So weevils are a pest that infest acorns. They eat them up, and then what is left in the acorn is not usable to eat. So it kind of just rots away. So you do not want a lot of weevils, because that means you don't have food to eat. These weevils in their adult stage, they fly, and they land on the acorns, you know, between July and October. They deposit their eggs, and then the pupa eat the acorns, and then they, you know, reemerge later on. What you can do is, back in the day, you can send up your kids to go knock up the acorns. They would knock the acorns. You can find the ones that are infested with weevils because they'll have a hole in them or something like that. Or you can just crack it open and look. Any acorns that were infested, they would be left on the ground. And then after the good ones are harvested, you throw a huge broadcast fire underneath your oak woodland. And then that will, one, it'll reduce fuel loading, but also two, it kills the weevils while they're still a little larvae eating the acorn. And that way they never grow up to be an adult that can sexually reproduce and make more babies. So this is, I like this figure just because it graphs out and formally recognizes traditional ecological knowledge as a scientific feedback loop. And then we can skip to the next one. Oh, here's a picture of a valley oak acorn. Can we go back to that one? Thanks. And then I like this one because it shows how glossy and leathery the acorns are. You can't process them fresh. You actually have to let them dry for a year so that when you pound and grind them, you're grinding them into a flour instead of spreading some leather. And then let's go on to the next photo. Here's the granary. Thank you. So the Mcgipto, just like most California natives in California, made granaries. These granaries would be made with willow, grapevine, and then they would be filled with layers of California mugwort and California bay leaves. If you don't know, California mugwort and California bay leaves, they have aromatic compounds in them that are actually natural insecticides. There's been empirical studies that shows that, yes, they are insecticides. So we would stuff them with these natural insecticides so that pests would not come in and eat them. And then we would have them stored in here for up to 2 or 3 years. And this ability to store food for 2 to 3 years of the acorns was especially important because oaks do not produce a reliable source of acorns every single year. They have mass years. And in these mass years, they dump a whole bunch, like an overabundance of acorns. And then there'll be like a 3, 4, 5 year period with acorns. This would be the diet. Acorns are highly nutritious. I think I saw a study somewhere where it said that it was about 65% carbohydrate, 50% protein, and then the rest was good fatty acids. So it is just like a peanut or something. It's really good for you. And then can we go to the next slide, please?
Yeah, how many acorns would they gather in a year?
Thousands of pounds per family, because that's your bread and butter for like 1 whole year. You're gathering thousands of pounds of acorns in a matter of like 2 months. So I just want to put this picture here. Much of the trees in Lower Bidwell Park are valley oaks. Whenever you hear like a large oak dropping, it's going to be one of the valley oaks. Cool fact, valley oaks are endemic to California, which means they're found nowhere else. Also, they're the largest oak tree in North America. Thirdly, the hooker oak, the hooker oak, which used to be living, you know, a couple decades ago, was the largest oak tree in North America before it died and fell. And then can we go to the next? There we go. There's a picture of the hooker oak. And then also there was a Robin Hood movie that was produced in Chico in like the 30s. The hooker oak features prominently in that movie. So it's also just a culturally important tree. And then here's my soapbox here. So the valley oak is a keystone species, and it actually has one of the most diverse habitats within California. However, it is threatened, and it has experienced a reduction of about 98% since colonization, so about 150 years ago. Over a span of 150 years, 98% of the population's gone extinct. This figure shows the existing populations of valley oaks. If you look at the upper right-hand corner of the Sacramento Valley, you can actually see this little spot. That's the city of Chico and Bidwell Park. So the city of Chico and Bidwell Park actually is one of the largest continuous valley oak habitats within the state of California. Another thing you'll see here is that the population is highly fragmented. Back before colonization, you would have had the majority of the Sacramento and San Joaquin Valley being riparian forest with valley oaks as one of the dominant vegetation types. So, and turning this entire Central Valley into farmland fragmented the population. So now you have these fragmented, isolated populations that aren't really able to have good gene flow. One of the studies I read mentioned that valley oaks, their pollen are only able to disperse by like 1 or 2 kilometers. So it is only able to have sex over a span of about 2 kilometers, so like 1.5 miles. So if you have one tree planted like every 1.5 miles along Highway 99, they're not really able to have sex and make babies. So seedling recruitment is a big issue in California for this species. So you might see some signs in Bidwell Park that say Valley Oak recruitment area, or please don't step on the saplings or something like that. It's because they're trying to help the Valley Oaks recruit themselves. Right now we have a bunch of granddaddies and grandmas that are getting old and falling, but there aren't young ones to replace them. And then also the current population is expected to decline by another 54% in the next century. So by the year 2100, we'll have less than 1% of the population of Valley Oaks left from before colonization. All right, we're good on that one. Oh, and then here's a weevil. So you can see that it's munching all the innards and it's all black and brown. That's not edible. The whole acorn's ruined. And this is one of the exit holes of probably its sibling. Shrubs. So, there we go. So here I'm going to specifically mention red bud and willow. There are other shrubs that fit this category, but for time's sake, I'm going to focus on these 2 species. So you can see a red bud in the background. Their flowers are more pink, but they're really easy to identify in Chico. They're just these big pink bushes when they're flowering. TK was utilized to create desired growth and actually keep the plant healthy. So if you could click on the figure there. Yeah, thank you. So here's another feedback loop. Again, I love these feedback loops. It makes it easy to understand. So if you have a red bud and you don't manage it, it'll have this gnarly curled form, and other shrubs like elderberry and willow will do this too. Eventually it'll actually like fall over on itself and curl in over its own weight, and it'll die to disease and insects and such, because in that form with a lot of dead branches and such, it's more susceptible to disease and pest infestation, and then it'll die. However, you can get rid of those dead branches and then encourage straight new shoots by mimicking natural disturbances. So on the bottom here, you can see that examples that they have listed for rejuvenated natural disturbances are lightning, flooding, and herbivory. Lightning causes a fire and it burns it. Flooding causes the whole shrub to break in half and it cuts it, coppices it at the bottom. And then herbivory just munches on the shoots. You can mimic that by setting purpose fire, so cultural fire. That would mimic a lightning caused fire. Coppicing would mimic flooding, and then pruning would mimic herbivory. By doing that, you get these new straight shoots. And these new straight shoots are disease-free. They have no lichens, mosses, and they have no insects. You can keep it in this healthy young state by just continuing the cycle. You cut it, you let it grow, you cut it, you let it grow. This helps the plant because it stays healthy, but it also helps humans because you get these long straight shoots, and these long straight shoots you want for basket weaving, you want for making arrows, you want for making whatever you want. Just like in modern day, you want long straight wooden dowels for construction. And we can go to the next slide. Here's a cute picture of Bidwell Park, and you can see some red bud in the background and some oak trees. And then go to the next one. Here is what I'm talking about when I say curled and gnarled and just, it looks, in my perspective, it looks very nasty. This top one, it's unusable. You can't use it for anything. But this bottom one, these long straight shoots, now you can do something with them. This bottom one is managed. So it was managed with fire and cutting, and you have these long straight shoots they can use for basket weaving. So you can see how long these long straight shoots are from her basket compared to her height. So this strand, is probably, 5 feet long. In order to get these 5 foot long straight shoots, the only way to do that is through managing it. So whether it be your redbud, your willow, your elderberry, what have you. And then can we go to the next one? So here's a basket made by my grandma. This is a sifting tray, and this was made with sedge root and also with willow shoots as the foundation. So this one would be used for separating fine flour that's ready for consumption from the coarse flour that still needs to be ground in a mortar. And go to the next one. This is a cooking basket. This is watertight. So this is what you'd put your acorn flour into, your hot water, and then make acorn mush. And go to the next one.
Yeah, how do they seal that to make it waterproof?
Oh, you don't seal it. So if you use sedge root is it expands when it retains water and expands. So by using like sedge root as your I think it's wefting material or just whatever you're weaving between the willow foundation, it'll actually retain the water and then expand, so then it makes it watertight, because if there are any spaces, then it fills in those spaces. Sedge root, I'm calling it sedge root. It's specifically Santa Barbara sedge. That's the species. And then it isn't technically a root. It's technically the rhizomes of it. Rhizomes are underground stems. But, colloquially, most people just talk anything below the soil surface as a root. So it's also sometimes called white sedge because the rhizomes are white. So you'd split it and then use it to wrap and stuff. Then here's another cooking basket. It has a different design though. And I think that's it for this one. But yeah. And then also, before I get into the geophytes, grasses, bunch grasses, so like your sedges and your purple needle bunch grass and your deer grass, they would be managed the same way as the shrubs with fire and for the same reasons. All right, so native geophytes. So I like using the term geophytes. It's just more specific. Colloquially, these are known as Indian potatoes or Indian onions. Even though they're not related to potatoes, there is the genus Allium in California, which they are true onions. They're just like, the onions you buy in the store, but I'm getting on a tangent here, but let's continue. So one of the most prolific ones is blue dicks. That's the common name, blue dicks. They look like that. And they're very common in Bidwell Park, especially Upper Bidwell Park. So these geophytes, they have edible, they're technically corms, but some people just call them bulbs. This is a picture of me with an ethereal spear. It's not a blue dix, it's a different type of geophyte. But you can see in the middle picture, the bulb. I'll just start calling them bulbs, but just know that it's not a true bulb. And then if you see, you might be able to see that there's a bulb on the bottom, and it's dissected into like 3 parts. So these corms, these bulbs, these geophytes in California, a lot of them have these bulblets attached. So just like garlic at home, you're able to split each wedge and then replant each wedge, and it'll grow into a whole new plant. These tiny bulbs attached to these bulblets attached to the main bulb are clones of the mother plant. So you can take them apart and then replant them. So you're taking one plant out of the ground, but you're replanting 3 in its place. And this is me doing that. And then this is the main bulb after I cleaned it. And it tastes like a starchy potato. It tastes good. You can also roast them, and the roasting process will bring out the sugars. So you can go to the next one. I included this picture just because I was walking along Bidwell Park on the middle trail a couple weeks ago, and I noticed all along the trail, someone had picked all the blue dick flowers and just thrown them on the ground. So this would be equivalent to going to like a deer population and neutering all the males. you're getting rid of the sexual reproduction organ of the plant, so it's not able to make seeds and not able to make babies and not able to have a good blue dick wildflower population in the next few years. So please don't pick the flowers. They're pretty, but leave them be so other people can enjoy them in years to come. And then this is a figure showing what I was talking about. This cartoon more clearly defines what a bulblet looks like, but it's these tiny bulbs attached to the mother bulb, and they range between like having 6 or 1, but on average, they'll usually have 2 or 3. So by replanting these in the soil that you just tilled, I use tilled by, I'm using that word because to get them out, you have to dig about 5 inches below the ground with a digging stick. And so you have all this loose, disturbed soil that the geophytes actually like, and it helps them reproduce. So you put the bulblets back into the big hole that you just dug out, and you're basically just planting next year's harvest. Now, I do not want any of you to go out and just start digging up bulbs and eating them. For one reason, Bidwell Park gathering is not allowed by the general public. 2, you might die. So here we have a few different species of death camas. It's called death camas because it will kill you. The bulbs look very similar to the other bulbs, so you can't really tell by looking at the bulbs if it's edible or not edible. Flowering structures and other plant architecture stuff, that's like, if you know what it is, then you can identify it. But again, even if it isn't death camas, because you might say, oh, all these have white flowers, I'll just avoid the ones with white flowers. There may be other geophytes that have different colored flowers that might not kill you, but make you very ill. So it's like mushroom hunting. You can die, you might get really sick, or it might be edible. It's kind of just a toss-up.
Okay, I think, did you want to talk about grinding holes?
Oh, yes. Oh, did I miss that on one of the slides? I think we had a, okay.
Yeah, I think we were in the flow and we kind of skipped over that. I'm gonna take us to that photo. I believe it was added.
Yeah, I thought we added it.
Oh, it is not added, but we can still talk about grinding holes.
Okay, so we had a picture of Chaussee. Chaussee is a California state park near Yosemite. It's a big grinding rock. So going back to acorns. So traditionally you would gather the acorns, then you would store them for a year. You have to dry them out for a year because when they're wet and leathery, it is impossible to grind them. You just start smearing things. Once they're dried after a year in storage, then you can grind them. And then once they're bone dry, you can grind them into a fine powder. By grinding them in these mortar holes, sorry, let me rephrase. You would grind them in these mortar holes, and these mortar holes, after many generations of the same family or the same tribe grinding in these exact same spots, instead of being a small hole, it'll be like 5 inches deep. So that's an important aspect of the process. And then after you have your flour that has been sifted through your sifting basket, then you can leach it. And once you leach it, you're removing the tannins out of it. The tannic acid in it is actually really bad for you. It's toxic. It'll cause you to have diarrhea and throw up and whatnot. So you got to leach it in water. Luckily, tannic acid is water soluble. So if you take a mound of sand and then you put a little barrier between the sand and the acorn flour, you can pour water over it and then it'll slowly leach out. Yeah.
Yeah, and just a note about grinding holes, there was actually a study done by the USGS in 2008, and they determined that it takes about 8 hours of continuous grinding and pounding, or 67,000 strikes, to create a hole about the depth of a grape, so about 3 centimeters. Just to like put into context how long these holes were used for. It's pretty crazy. I think that was the end of it, He-Lo.
Yeah, and I can answer questions. I'm going to scroll to the top of the comments and then just work through the chat. So the first question that I see is, you said Bidwell had a daughter. Yes. So if you don't know, John Bidwell was like 45 or so, and Annie Bidwell was like 21 when they got married. He was a lot older, and he was in Chico for a lot of years before he married Annie Bidwell. John Bidwell married Nopani. Nopani was the daughter of the headman of Mcgipto. They were married in a Native American verified wedding. So it was a traditional wedding ceremony that was recognized by the tribe. And Nopani and John Bidwell had a daughter called Amanda Wilson, my grandma. That relationship was known to Annie Bidwell when she came to Chico. The first interaction that she had with Nopani was that Annie Bidwell came to Chico after getting married to John Bidwell, and she wanted the keys to the mansion, the Bidwell mansion that he built for Annie Bidwell. Nopani was like the housekeeper or the butler. She managed the house and everything. And Annie Bidwell asked Nopani for the keys to the house. And Nopani just looked her dead in the eye and said, no, you're wife number one. I'm wife number one. You're wife number two. You don't get the keys. Wife number one keeps the keys. So Annie Bidwell wrote about this. There's been some publications the last 10, 15, 20 years that have shown this. So yeah, John Bidwell had kids with Nopani. Not with Annie Bidwell, but with Nopani. All right, I'm going to scroll on down. Okay. When I was a kid. Yeah, so the plants were California mugwort and California bay leaves. They're aromatic. They have really potent, strong smell, so they're really easy to identify. Oh, how many kids with Nopani? To be honest, I'm not sure. I know for one, Amanda Wilson, I think that there was a son too, but I don't know much about the son. I don't know if it is his son or what happened. So I just know that for fact, my grandma, Amanda Wilson, is the daughter of John Bidwell. Okay. How many M people registered here? Gail Kimball, could you tell me what you mean by how many M people registered here?
How many Mechoopda people?
Oh, okay. And do you mean registered like how many people are in the tribe or?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, today I think we have about 500 tribal members, about 550. I think approximately 350 of them live in Chico.
Is there any tradition of keeping the language and passing it on to the young kids?
Yes. So there have been a recent language revitalization effort in recent years. The Mcgipto Tribe actually got a list of recordings from the federal government, I think like 2005. I don't really know the history behind it, but it was part of the war effort. The federal government wanted to learn the Mcgipto language so that then they could use that as part of the code talkers for like World War II and stuff. Wow. The thought being that if they learned the language, then the Germans would have no idea what Mcgipto is. Stuff like that. We got a whole list of videos around 2005 from the federal government, and they're just like, hey, this was declassified. It's no longer top secret. We think you might want it back. So yeah, we are doing more language classes and teaching it, and it's in the process of being revitalized.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I wrote that I had a long time ago a student named Thelma Wilson. Do you know who she is?
That's my aunt.
That's your aunt. So she was the daughter of Amanda?
Yes. Okay, wait, okay. So let me go through the history.
Yeah.
Family history. So Amanda Wilson had a son named Sherman Wilson. Sherman Wilson had the daughters Thelma Wilson and Harriet Wilson. Harriet Wilson is my grandma. So then Harriet Wilson had Frank Ramirez, and Frank Ramirez had me. Thelma Wilson herself never had kids.
Right.
Yeah. She's still alive.
Because Michelle Shover, you know, has done a lot of Chico history, and she's adamant that Bidwell didn't have children.
Well, unfortunately, I'm sorry, she's wrong.
Yeah, I know, but it's an interesting bias.
Yeah, so Thelma Wilson and both Harriet Wilson, they're the direct granddaughter of Amanda Wilson. Both say up and down, yeah, we were told that John Biddle was her dad. Annie Biddle, Annie Biddle even acknowledged that they were the kids because all of them got to work in the mansion. They got to work as the butler, as the servant, and they got to work inside doors, and they didn't have to do any of the ranch work. So they got special privileges. Annie Bidwell gave them special privileges. Annie Bidwell also gave special privileges to Amanda Wilson because she had her set up how everything would be split in the land. So when she deeded the land to the Mechoopda Tribe for a reservation, she made Amanda Wilson in charge of saying, this is where you live, this is where you live, this is where this person lives, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah.
Got it. And just so you know, I was told that Annie was 36 when she got married, and that was part of the reason that they didn't have kids, maybe.
Oh, I was off by the years. I just know that there was a big gap between them.
Yeah. Right.
All right. So I have Logan's question. Were Mcgipto children forced into boarding schools? For the most part, no, but some of them did go to boarding schools. Annie Biddle actually tried to work with the local school in Chico to get most of them to be integrated. Annie Biddle's big thing is she wanted to assimilate the Mcgipto people so that one day they would just be Americans and no longer be Mcgipto. And one of her things is she tried to get them into the schools. But I do know that some children were sent to boarding schools. The majority, though, were not. Okay. If we were to plant native species on our property, do you have any recommendations on which ones to plant? So Katie, where do you live?
I live sort of by Enloe Hospital currently.
Oh, okay. And how's your backyard? Do you get full sun, part sun, mostly shade?
I have one spot that I can get the minimum requirement for full sun, but I have a lot of partial and shade.
Okay.
Like partial shade and full shade.
Okay. My recommendation is if you like something that smells nice, mugwort, California mugwort would be nice. It grows really easily. It's kind of weedy though, so it's aggressive. It'll start spreading, but it grows very tall, like 6 feet, and it smells like white sage. So if you like the smell of white sage, you might like that. If you have enough room on the property, a valley oak would be nice. And then grow geophytes in the sun. Some geophytes prefer full sun, some of them prefer partial shade. So look up that on Calscape. Calscape is a great resource. They'll tell you what the requirements are. And then I would also recommend, let's see, some miner's lettuce. That's also really easy to grow and it's edible. Right now in my garden, I have blue dicks. I have some panther lily. I have some Humboldt lily, miner's lettuce. I also have a elderberry growing. I don't know if you want shrubs or small grasses or stuff, but elderberry is a cool shrub to have too.
That's great. And is there a place you recommend for getting seeds or starts for these native plants?
Yeah, there's a native plant nursery in Chico. I think that's what it's called. It's Chico Native Plant Nursery. I know they do retail. They'll have locally sourced seeds, but you can also go to the California Native Plant Society website, and they'll have a list of nurseries in California that do California native plants. It won't be the locally sourced populations, but that won't really be a big problem if it's your backyard, if you're just going to put it in a garden. So any of those listed places on California Native Plant Society would be cool.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I'm looking at Pablo's question. You said that it was $400,000 to improve the fish ladders. That would cost, what would the cost be in today's dollars? Okay, so that was in 2013. So the total project was like $2.2 million, but the city of Chico's cost share was $400,000 in 2013. So that was 7 years ago. The city of Chico couldn't come up with the funds. I don't know the history behind it that much, but they dropped out of it. They let the other interested parties know that they were not going to participate. They weren't going to put up the $400,000. And due to that, the fish ladder was not fixed in 2013, 2014. Okay, Laura's question. Do the Mcgipto or the managers of the preserve want to reintroduce regular seasonal burning on these lands? Yes. At least the Mcgipto does. We want to burn it all. So many of our native plants would benefit, and most of our cultural resources, we need to have them burn in order to gather from them. The B-Sur currently does do burning. That's above Bidwell Park, and they do these burns. They do prescribed burns. They don't do it with cultural intent like we would, but you know, basically the same thing, potato, potato. So yes, I think there has been a movement for Bidwell Park in general to start doing burns on there, but I don't know how far the city of Chico or how the city of Chico delegates that. I'm not aware of anything from their side. And then John All put Cowscape. Yep, thank you, John All. That's nice. Native Flora Native Nursery. Okay. Yep. Sorry. That looks like it. The pods of red bud are edible. Yes, they are edible. Did I miss anyone's question, or does anyone have any questions that they did not put in the chat? Yeah, Riley, could you show the Mcgipto houses, the subterranean dwellings, the uis? Yeah, that's what an ui looks like. The Mcgipto tribe recently got land into trust about 10 years ago, or actually we purchased land like 15 years ago. We just got it into trust after dealing with a lawsuit with Butte County for like 15 years. So like a few years ago, the land was put into trust. And we built an ui on it, and we're currently building a roundhouse on it.
I'm sorry, He-Lo, can you repeat where is that happening?
The Mcgipto tribe has land in trust about halfway between Chico and Oroville. It is along Clear Creek and Dry Creek. It's basically where Highway 149 starts, where Highway 149 starts and like where Highway 99 splits.
Okay.
Any other questions? Feel free to ask them.
You had another one pop in the chat.
Oh, I did? Okay. Hi, He-Lo. Was there management by the Mcgipto with large grazing elk and deer? Yes, there was. So if you don't know, Chico used to have elk, deer, and also pronghorn antelope, if you didn't know that. I don't know if you know what a pronghorn antelope is, but they're currently threatened. They look really cool. But yes, we did manage meadows and other habitat types to encourage spots for them to come. Because if you have a really biodiverse meadow or landscape that you know that they'll want to come and munch on food, then you have a reliable place that you can hunt them. So yes, we did do that. Is there another question that I might have missed?
I don't think so. I think you answered everything.
Okay. Any more questions?
Yeah, could you say a word about spiritual practices like the function of shamans or healers and herbalists? I know sometimes it's a topic people don't like to talk about, but I think people are interested in it. It's important.
Yeah, I purposely didn't get into that, but I can talk on a little for my comfort level. Yeah. So we had medicine men, and what they did is they used herbs and plant materials and then use that to heal. So like, for instance, the inner bark of willow has aspirin in it. So that's where aspirin, the medicine is derived from, is from willow plant. So we would split the willow and then take that natural aspirin that's in it and then brew it into a tea or something, and that would be a natural fever reducer. There is California mugwort. It was traditionally smoked as a bronchodilator. So if you had a cold or asthma, smoke it. I do not recommend smoking or do any of these things that I'm saying because, for instance, California mugwort has been shown to be a carcinogen. It will cause cancer. So even if we traditionally did that, you should not do that. Then another one is yerba santa. Yerba santa was, again, you chew the leaves and put it in your gum line. It's also a bronchodilator. Or it's traditionally used as a bronchodilator. I shouldn't say it is. There's no empirical proof that I know of that says that, but yes.
And what was the role of women in all this, where you said medicine men?
I don't know, to my knowledge, if I believe it was more common for men to be the medicine men. They may have had medicine women too, frequently, like, you know, intermixed, but to my knowledge, I don't believe it was as common, at least not for like the medicine man position. So like the shaman position, but like, you know, these remedies that I'm talking about, like bronchodilators, those all would be done by like your mom or something, or your grandma. So on the local level, like within your family, yeah, the women would be doing it, but like the town doctor, the medicine man, that would probably most likely be a man. And
would the chief of the tribe traditionally be a man?
We didn't have chiefs, we had headmen. Traditionally, most likely it was a man, but they had no absolute authority. They had no power. It was just a person that was generally respected. So if someone was really smart and made wise decisions, usually their voice would be followed, but they had no power. They could not tell you to do anything. They had no ability to rule or anything. Like, they just were generally respected and their guidance was respected.
Thanks.
Yeah.